Perfect. All right. So you guys, like Dr. Hansen said, we're going to be talking about writing a strong personal statement today. So just to let you know, our vision for this webinar is to make it as interactive as it can be over Zoom. And so we're going to be, like Dr. Hansen said, we're going to be utilizing the chat. So make sure you have that up. We're going to have you participate in a couple of polls. And we're also going to be kind of working through whatever iteration of your personal statement that you have. So if you have a draft, have it ready, because there are going to be times that we'll add some edits. If you are just starting out, pen and paper, and we'll help you get it started. So hopefully you leave today with a little bit more than you had when you began. Okay, so first we're going to be asking you a couple of different questions to be answered in the chat. So we're going to go ahead and get to our first slide here with those questions. If you want to advance the slideshow one slide, please. Awesome. So in the chat, we're just wanting to know, where are you in the process in writing your personal statement? Really super simple. Give us a 1 if you haven't started. Give us a 2 if you're brainstorming, outlining, first drafts. A number 3, give us a 4 if you're editing, a 5 if you're done. Okay, looks like a lot of people are at the beginning stages of writing your personal statement. Ooh, we've got some first drafts going on. Awesome. So we really tried hard to make this webinar relevant for all of you. So awesome. Thank you for letting us know that information. We've got a couple more questions. So we're going to go to that second question. When are you planning on graduating? So give us a year, maybe fall, spring, so we can kind of know what your timeline is. Oh, me too. Spring 2021. Yay. Okay, awesome. A lot of different years. So I like to see some of you here. You're not quite working on a personal statement maybe for after graduation, but you're starting early. Good job. Okay, nice to see you guys here. And then the last one is, to what kind of programs are you applying? So are we looking to get PhDs, PsyDs, MA, MDs? Do you have any pre-med here? MDs and PhDs. And it's okay if you don't know, right? It's all right if you're undecided at this point. Nice. Undecided, yeah. Oh, JD, yeah, awesome. All right, well, welcome everyone. We hope that we've made this to where you guys are going to get the most out of it, regardless of where you're going to go. But thank you for giving us this input so we can make this for you. Okay, without further ado, Tanner's going to start us in.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. So, before we start writing a personal statement, we need to know what a personal statement is, right? So what a personal statement is a concise writing sample that allows you to introduce yourself and showcase that you are a good fit for the program. So typically for most programs that you will apply for, you will have the actual application itself, you'll have your letters of recommendation, you'll have your CV, and you'll have the personal statement. So the thing that makes the personal statement so important is that it really gives you the chance to show off your writing ability, which is of course very important in any graduate program, but also it gives you a chance to really showcase your personality and show this program who you are, because that's not something that you can necessarily show through your experiences and things like that, right? So that's why we do have this workshop on the personal statement specifically. So we are going to go ahead and go over a brief outline, and we will go in depth in all of these throughout the webinar, but just to give a brief overview. So the personal statement will start with an introduction to yourself. So basically giving context to who you are. It will show that you are qualified. So maybe lab experience or internships, things like that. It will describe your goals and interests. So maybe what sort of career path you want to go down. It will have a program specific paragraph, which will basically tailor this statement to the program specifically that you are going to be applying for. And it will finally tie back into your introduction at the end, just to make it seem like one concise, cohesive writing sample. Yeah, so first we'll start with the introduction, and Amanda will take that away.
So yeah, we're going to start in with introduction to yourself. And first we want to start with a hook to evoke some kind of emotion. So think of it this way. We want to grab the reader's interest, and we want to help them remember you after they're done reading your personal statement. Next, something that your introduction is going to do is tell the story of what brought you to where you are now. So give us some background. Help us get to know you. And this part should naturally flow into your ultimate goals, right? Graduate school, MD, whatever you're planning to do. And then we want to showcase your enthusiasm and the attributes that you want to show off through examples instead of stating them outright. So instead of just saying, I'm a critical thinker, carefully select some stories that help the reader come to that conclusion on their own. So make sure that the stories that you tell or the hook that you include is relevant to what end goal you have, which is getting into your program. Okay, so we have some examples for you today. And like I mentioned, we're talking about kind of managing the impression that you're wanting to make on these people. So as we read through this one, kind of think about what impression you're having of this person that we're going to read their beginning of their personal statement. Okay, so it goes, ever since I was little, I knew I wanted to help people. My grandfather had dementia and it really affected me. Several of the classes I've taken at ASU covered Alzheimer's disease, and it was always a favorite topic of mine to learn about. So not bad, right? But we want to know what you think. So we're going to go ahead and open up a poll. So you should see a poll question, 3 poll questions pop up on your screen in a second. And really, we want to know on a scale from 1, meaning none or not at all, to 5, meaning a lot, what your impression is of this person that we just read the beginning of their personal statement for. So let us know if you don't see it.
Having technical difficulties with the poll.
Uh-oh, well, that's all right. We'll give it a second, maybe. Should we go into the chat then?
I think let's go into the chat.
Yeah, let's go into the chat. Okay, so first question is this personal statement, would it stand out to you if you read it? Yes or no? It's a yes or no question. So would it stand out? Would it not stand out? Got a couple of no's. Yeah, not so much. Now, did it evoke some kind of emotional response from you? Give me a yes or a no in the chat. Yeah, we got a couple of yeses, some no's, right? Yeah, they talked about, dementia. I mean, that's kind of, yeah. So let's go ahead and we're going to kind of break this first one apart and think about the different pieces. So we'll advance to the next slide and we'll kind of look it over. So first, the statement of ever since I was little. You guys, we've all read this one, right? So it's not particularly unique. So we're going to say that this is overused. If you have a limited amount of words to use in your personal statement, use them for your unique ideas. Next, I knew I wanted to help people. Well, who doesn't, right? Like, especially with a lot of you guys going to psych and medical school, right? And we had a JD, right? You guys want to help people. So we're going to say this is unoriginal, right? But we can say this as long as we can say, well, how do you want to help people or why, right? So we can use this idea and really expand on it. Next, we talked about the grandfather with dementia and how, and that it affected you. But the thing is that that's a bit vague, right? So how did it affect you? And why are you bringing this up now? So there's probably a cool story under this, but we didn't get it with just this statement. So specificity is going to really help here. And then last, we talked about, hey, at ASU, I took this class. It was and had a favorite topic of mine. But we all know that having a favorite topic or liking a topic doesn't mean that you want to do it for a living, right? For a career. So we're going to label this as a little dull. It didn't give me passion and excitement and interest. And something to maybe save this would be like, well, why is it a favorite topic of mine, right? What about it was so interesting and made it so salient to me that I'm like, I want to do this as a career. Okay, so Tanner's going to give us another example to kind of work through.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look at this second example, and then we will do exactly what we just did, where I will ask you the same questions and we can answer in the chat. Okay, so here we go with the second example. As I chewed on a mouthful of flavorless mixed vegetables in the cafeteria of the assisted living facility that my grandfather called home, I tried to stay positive. He was smiling and happy to see me, his daughter, Anne. The problem was that my name is Erica, and that day marked the 3rd visit in a row that he didn't recognize me. As his disease progressed, my family and I met with his social worker regularly. Her support didn't make his decline any less painful, but it did help me recognize my emotions and process them. When considering possible careers, I kept thinking back to the impact this one person made on my life and how I coped with those challenges. This made me wonder, how do people gain and use tools for coping? And what happens if someone doesn't learn how to cope with stressful events? These questions led me to pursue a career in therapy with a focus on giving people tools to cope with challenges and grief. Okay, so now that we've gone through that example, let's go ahead and answer in the chat again. So the first question that we will be answering is, do you feel like you got to know this student from that introduction? Yes, yes, yes. All right. Sounds like a lot of yeses so far. So yeah, definitely. We were almost put into this student's life for that brief moment, right? We learned about their family, about how they dealt with it, and all of those things. So the next question is: do you feel like this intro evoked emotion in you? So again, that can be a yes, a no, a kinda, maybe. All right, sounds like we're seeing a lot of yeses. Yeah, so again, this student did do a great job of putting us, oh, and a kinda. Yeah, so this student did a great job of putting us into this moment, right? We could maybe picture ourselves sitting in that waiting room, maybe chewing on those vegetables. They really told us a story, right? And storytelling can be great for evoking emotion. And then the third question will be, do you feel, excuse me, like this introduction stood out to you? Again, a yes, a no, kinda, a little bit, sorta, 1 through 5, however, yeah, maybe, yeah. Okay, so yeah, so I do see mostly yeses, and that is definitely great because while this student's situation may not be necessarily unique, right? There are thousands, maybe millions of people who have family members who suffer from Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that. However, this student really worked to talk about their own personal experience, how they coped with it, how it made them feel. So they took this scenario that may not be the most unique thing ever, but they made it uniquely them, right? So that's something that's super important to do when thinking about writing your hook and all of that. Yeah. And speaking of, oh, excuse me, one slide early. Okay, so when it comes to writing a hook, there are some great things that you can include. You definitely do not have to include all of these, but these are just some helpful things that may make your story stronger and may make them more personal, more emotional, things like that. So you can include things such as aha moments, moments when you changed your mind. So maybe you thought you would go into some career field, but then something happened and now you shifted and now you're doing whatever you are interested in now. You can include a relationship or a person that inspired you. So maybe a family member, a person in the field that you're interested in. You can include struggles that you've learned from. And a very key point when it comes to struggles is they're great to include, but you want to make sure that you are not focusing on the negatives too much. You definitely want to highlight how you overcame it, how you persevered, and the positive outcome which you learn from it and things like that, right? So definitely be sure not to focus on the dark parts of it and focus on the positives. And then again, classes, mentors, hobbies that led to discovery. So basically what really got you into this field. So now, after talking about some great things to include, we are going to give you all some time to take some notes and think about what you could include in your own personal statement draft. You can just brainstorm, or you can edit the draft that you already have, as some of you do. So we will give you about a minute for that. And here are some tips on the screen for you to read if you're having any trouble. And if you have any questions at all during this time, you can ask them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, and Dr. Hanson, Amanda, and myself will be here to answer them. So yeah, we'll give you about a minute to go ahead and do that.
Try to do some mood music. Can you hear it?
I can hear it.
Is the personal statement different than a statement of purpose? Is that two separate?
What kind of program asks for a statement of purpose?
I'm looking at neuroscience PhDs.
Yeah,
It's the
so
same.
yeah, I would think more about the program itself. Like PhD programs, it's going to be the same. MD programs, it's basically the same thing. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, because I have a statement of purpose written out and it's following about the same outline. I wasn't
Great. Yeah.
sure. Okay, thank you.
Should I bring the music back? Or is it just distracting? Do we have more people with questions? Because then we don't need the music. Okay, so hopefully that was, that was about 90 seconds, a minute. When you are brainstorming things for a personal statement or a statement of purpose, it is good to brainstorm in bursts and just jot down anything that comes to you. You can always edit later, but just brainstorm in bursts, any aha moments that you've had, any decisions or inspirations, and you'll tie it all together through your editing process.
Okay, we're going to move on. And like Dr. Hansen said, this is, for some of you, maybe the beginning. So definitely this is, at least hopefully you have something down on the page and you'll add to it and edit and edit and edit over and over again. Those of you who have a draft, you know how that goes, right? And so we're going to go ahead and move to the next section. So let's go ahead and talk about your qualifications now. So now that they got to know you a little bit better, we want to expand on some of the more relevant things that you've done. So we're going to talk about experience in research, if you have any. We're also going to talk about experiences that you had in maybe jobs or volunteering that showcase attributes or goals of yours. And then another thing that you want to do in this section is think about including some coursework that's relevant. Now, you don't need to actually include courses if you don't have a reason to do so. But if you do, some things that you want to think about are maybe you took some courses outside of the requirements that really showcase your interests and showed that you went out and selected a class to take to really explore those. Try to avoid including coursework that everyone in your cohort had to take those. So don't include a Psych 101 unless you absolutely have a really great reason to do so. Okay, so we're going to move a little bit deeper and talk about adding research to your personal statement. So again, like Tanner, I think mentioned, when you apply to graduate school, you're going to be sending a bunch of elements, including your CV. And so because they already have CV in hand, we're not going to list again. They already have that. So instead, think about showing that you know the whys behind the research that you did. So graduate students are expected to know how to do things, sure, but they're also expected to know why they're doing it and when it's appropriate to use that skill. So a prospective mentor is totally okay with teaching you some of the hows. So it's great to show them that you have the understanding, critical thinking to think about the whys. Also consider adding research experiences and show how you gained something or what you contributed or what you learned. And then relate them back to your goals. It's okay if the research experience you had isn't in alignment with your goals now. That could be an interesting story. So just make sure that you're including it in a positive way that shows your progression into what your goals are now. And then we're going to go ahead and add other experiences too. Don't think of this section as a kitchen sink section though. Don't list everything that you've ever done. Instead, selectively include experiences that provide evidence for your skills, your enthusiasm, your readiness to be a graduate student. So don't feel compelled to include everything you've ever done. You can be selective here. All right, it looks like we have, yeah, that's a really great question. Somebody asked in the chat, what if you don't have research experience? That's okay, right? It's a great place to add it in here, and it depends on the program that you have, whether or not that's really relevant. So what kind of program are you going to? Well, either way, you know, if it's okay if you don't have any, you're just not going to mention it. I wouldn't say I don't have any research experience, right? Keep it super positive. Did you have a job that was super relevant? Spend time in what is positive and great about you, and you should be in good shape. Okay, let's go ahead, and I believe we have another example for you guys. Not really sure yet.
Yeah,
And that's totally
if
fine.
I'll just, if I could just add to that a little bit.
Please, thank you.
So a lot of you said that you're still a couple years out from graduating, or at least a couple semesters out from graduating. If you're looking at master's programs or PhD programs, they are going to really value research experience. So if you don't have any yet, but you have time, even if it's just one semester, every semester of research experience you have will look good. So think about it if you've still got a couple semesters left before you graduate. If you don't have a couple semesters left, then really think about the skills that you've gained, experiences that you've had, if you have internships, if you have jobs, if you had tutoring experience, if you had TA experience, if you had any extracurricular activities that you've participated in, especially if you had a leadership role. All of those things can be used to illustrate your skills, your enthusiasm, and your readiness to be a graduate student, your maturity. Really just focus on like what it says on this slide here. What do you have that would demonstrate your skills, your enthusiasm, and your maturity or readiness?
Thank you for that. Okay, we have another example for you guys. So this example is for this next section that we were talking about, including your experience. We're not going to do a poll, well, I guess, or anything in the chat for this one. So really just think about your impressions as we go and how you can apply some of the things that we're going to talk about to your own personal statement. Okay, so I'm going to read it to you. It says, in the summer of 2019, I participated in an internship opportunity at Banner Sun Health Research Institute. I got to learn about neurodegenerative diseases in a clinical setting and observe assessments of dementia progression. 2 other summer interns and I worked on 3 summer projects together, each taking the lead on one of them. The project I was in charge of focused on investigating the correlation between the severity of dementia and symptoms of depression. At the end of the summer, I got to present my project at the end of the summer symposium. So not bad, right? It has a lot of really great elements. So we're going to go ahead and talk about what was included. First, they talked about, hey, I got to participate in this really cool internship. Next, they talked about some of the experiences they got to have in this really cool internship. And then finally, they talked about what they did, their contribution, and what made this specific to them. And this is great, but think about what this section is supposed to do. What is your personal statement doing for you? In this case, this is really great to showcase how awesome this internship is, but you're writing your personal statement to get into graduate school, medical school, wherever you're going. And so we want to showcase how cool you are, not necessarily how cool the internship was. So we're going to go ahead and we have a slide here on the left-hand side. It's the exact same thing that I just read you. On the right, it's going to be something that has the same stuff in it, but just a little edited. So again, we're going to look at the edited side, and you don't have to read it. It's the same stuff. We're just adding a little something. So for the first part, we're really just shifting the focus to the person who wrote it. I was selected to participate, right? If it's something that you had to apply for and something that you had to be selected for, you earned it. So we're going to make sure that you give a nod to that. Next, we're going to look at the example 3 and think about, okay, well, they put their contribution pretty low. It comes pretty late in this paragraph. And as we edit it, we're just going to shift it up so that we can say, hey, look at, this is what I did. This is my contribution. And that means that that's going to be more of the focal point of this paragraph. And then next, on the previous example that we're working on, we talk about other important things that you experienced, and it's okay to keep them in. So we're just going to shift them down and let them provide context for this experience for you, and not necessarily be the focal point of the experience. So we're going to look at the next slide, and it's a really quick, because I know this is a lot of text. So the first part talks about the experience. The second part talks about what you did. And the third part talks about the additional information or additional experiences that would be helpful for them to know. Okay, so we're going to move on to looking at your drafts now. Like Tanner did before, we're going to give you a couple of minutes and we're going to add experience to the notes that you've taken. So if you're just starting out, we're going to do exactly what we just outlined. Jot down your experience, what you did, and the other things that you did. Maybe include those things too. So you're going to just jot those down. If you already have a draft, we're going to go ahead, and now's a good time to grab a highlighter. And you're going to look and read and find your contribution. Highlight that contribution in your own personal statement, and then ask yourself, is it too far down? Is it missing? And then maybe we can move it up. So we're going to give you a minute to work on your own personal statement or to outline it. We'll be right back. Oh, and as ever, if you guys have questions, we love questions. So go ahead and throw them in the chat or unmute, because if you have something specific about your personal statement, we are here for you today. So feel free to let us know if you have something to expand on. So we have a question in the chat, and we didn't mention it, Shelby, so thank you for bringing it up. A personal statement is usually about 1.5 pages, but it's going to be specific to the program that you're applying to. So when you go to their website, make sure that you look for what they're looking for. For instance, I just applied, and I applied to one place that wanted 2 to 4 pages single spaced, and another program was like, let's do 1.5 pages. So typically it's about 1.5 pages, but you're going to want to do your research and make sure you hit exactly what they're asking for. Great question. Yes, and we are recording this now, so we're going to be posting it on our website. So you should be able to access it later. Okay, yeah. So you're applying to your PhD program in the lab. You're currently an RAN. So what's the best way to include your research experience without becoming redundant? That is a great question. So if you think about it, you're going to be talking about your experiences in this lab, but then you can expand on it, right? Because you're probably engrossed enough to understand maybe the direction that the lab's going in. Maybe you have some really great insight on projects that you're interested in participating in to kind of move the science that's being done in that particular lab forward. So that's a great opportunity to tie into that. I bet Dr. Hansen probably has a couple of points on that too that she can expand on.
Yeah, I would just say don't sell yourself short with your research experience, your RA experience. You may think, well, everyone does this. It's not special, but it is special. And not everyone is going to do the exact things that you did in the lab. So, you know, what you did, the part in here that is sort of pinkish, peachish color, you would really want to start your paragraph with the strongest impact that you had. And then the blue part, other things you did, that's where you'd want to list the other skills that you had. So if you took a leadership role in the lab, if you led a weekly meeting, or you talked about a research article, or you developed, some new protocol, anything that you did that really shows your leadership, your skills, emphasize that. And then you can sort of quickly list the other skills that you had that maybe are not as impressive. The point here is to really emphasize what's impressive, and include other things quickly. So this is where you can think about what is listed in my CV. If it's listed in your CV, you don't need to just list everything again here, but elaborate on it, right? Like go into more detail. If it says that you ran participants, well, go into detail. How many participants did you run? How were you involved? Did you select them? Did you, create a protocol to make it more efficient for how they came into the lab? Anything like that that you can think of, that's what you'd want to include in here. And then it won't feel like it's just relisting what's in your CV. So hopefully that answered your question, but feel free to follow up if you have additional.
And we had one more question that we got in the chat. I answered in the chat, but just to make sure everybody hears it in case you don't have your chats open. The question was, if you're a Barrett student and you're working on a thesis, do you include it here? Absolutely, right? Because an honors thesis is, if you think about it, kind of like a mini master's. So you're showing them, or a mini dissertation. So you're showing them that you can go through this process of formulating a question, a hypothesis, seeing it through all the trials and tribulations, because we all know your Barrett thesis is probably not going exactly the way you planned it, particularly in this pandemic. So it's a great way to show your resiliency, your leadership. So definitely expand on those things, because it's a really great selling point for sure.
Okay, should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, we have one more question, and then yes, we should move on. So last question is, how long should the experience portion be? If I was in an RA or an RA in a lab, 2 labs, yeah. Okay, yeah, so the question is, should we have separate paragraphs for, if you were in 2 different labs and you did a Barrett thesis, do each of them get a paragraph? So my answer to that is, because I came up against this too, so I got a lot of really good advice on this one from my mentors, is that it really depends, right? You don't have a lot of time to do all of the things that you need to do. So you're gonna really wanna squeeze out as many words as you can. And so it depends, right? If you can fit your experiences in the same paragraph and they make sense to be there, and they flow well, and your topic sentence makes sense for that, that's fine. But just be careful that you're not going over your word count, right? So, and if you have it written out, we can always help you. You come into the Student Success Center, we kind of look at it, because that's going to be kind of a specific question to everyone's specific theses or personal statements.
Yeah, and my advice would be, your thesis, you want to emphasize what your most impressive attributes and skills are. The thesis is the most impressive. That probably gets a whole paragraph. The other 2 maybe get combined into 1 paragraph, or maybe they're just kind of like a sentence here, a sentence there.
Okay, Tanner, do you want to take I feel like I'm dominating this thing. I'm so sorry. Do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, I was just answering in the chat, but I was like, I will just wait. Yeah, so that's a great question, Amy. So we definitely do not have to include experience that necessarily ties in directly with our program, right? Because I would say that the biggest point that you are getting across is what you learned, how this helped you to develop, how this maybe made you think differently about the world. And that's something that you can definitely capitalize on here. So like, even if you were to have just worked a summer job at a grocery store or something like that, that may not necessarily be like the most ideal situation, right? But that definitely does not mean that you didn't learn something that can be applied to this program, right? Because there are things such as hard work, determination, things like that we can learn in any experience, basically, any job, any club, anything like that. So really look at it from a broader sense, I would say, and you can talk about how that experience can really tie into a graduate school program, even if it may not seem obvious at first, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and depending on the type of program you're interested in, like your grocery store example, Tanner, well, if you're applying to law schools, was there a case where the law was involved and it like inspired you to become a lawyer? Or if you're interested in going into some sort of master's program, did you interact with a customer over, several days who was really struggling and you were able to help them? So as you all saw in the example, those personal moments can be very powerful, but you want to link them back to your current goal or what you're doing. So if you have a personal moment like that, then you can definitely tie that in. That can be really effective. Also, just like in research, if you have any leadership experience, so if you work at Starbucks, but you are a shift manager, or you rose through the ranks, then you can put that in there as well. Any presentations that you had to give, any public speaking that you had to do, any writing that you had to do, those are all good things to include.
And then one more question in the chat. It says, if you have any discrepancy in your academic record, should you deal with it here in your personal statement? You can.
I would say it would really depend on what the discrepancy is.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. If you, for instance, have some grades that you're a little bit worried about, say, were they in the program that you're in? Like if you have grades early on in your college experience, and then you can show a turnaround that you started getting really good grades at the end when you started to get into what you're interested in, that's great. So make sure you mention that. Like I started to do really, really well in all of my academics when I found what I was passionate about, right? So yeah, that one's going to be pretty specific to you.
Yeah, you don't want to get too into the weeds on those sorts of things. So there is a fine balance between being personal and being too personal.
Yeah.
So you really need to think carefully because, and you need to spin it into a positive. So Tanner kind of talked about this earlier. But like, for example, if you are someone who has had a close family member who had a mental health episode, and that's inspiring you to be a therapist, you really want to think carefully about how much you divulge, whether it's yourself or a family member, because you don't want there to be red flags. And it's the same thing with an academic discrepancy. So you just need to think very carefully about it. And for any personal, if you have a specific question, we'd love to help you, but probably more individually one-on-one in the Student Success Center. Okay, so what ones would you address? I mean, I think Amanda brought up the best one is if you had maybe one semester where your GPA was really bad for a legitimate reason, something out of your control, then you could include that. Or if you sort of turned it around later on, your early GPA was not so good, but your later one is, you could put that in there. If you have like W's on your transcript, you don't need to explain every single one of those away. That just draws attention to the W's on your transcript. Like lots of people have a W here or there. If you had an issue of academic integrity violation, it would really depend on the nature of the academic integrity violation, whether you would want to try to explain it or not. If you had a mental health crisis, you'd want to think about, do I want to include that or do I not want to? If you, had another issue at a job or something like that, where things didn't go well, you'd want to think really hard about that.
And just think of it this way. One of my mentors brought up something. If you're going to bring it up, that means it's going to be on their mind. So like Dr. Hansen said, make sure that there's a really good reason that you want it to be on their mind, right? And then make sure that you spend the time to not have that be the impression that they leave with, yeah. Okay, do we have any other ones we did not answer before we move on?
So something about medical withdrawals. Yeah,
Okay.
that one I think is
Yeah.
it it probably deserves some attention in your personal statement. But again, like you don't want it to be your whole personal statement, right? You just want to maybe address it and then focus on the skills that you have. So there was an earlier question about like core competencies. You know, what are they looking for in graduate students? Well, obviously they're looking for someone who's smart enough to complete the program, but that's not it. You know, they're looking for people who are curious, for people who know how to solve problems, for people who understand the scientific method, for people who have great interpersonal skills, for people who have leadership experience, for people who are strong writers or strong public speakers. So those are all things that I would certainly emphasize. You know, certainly being hardworking is valuable as well, but that's something that like almost everyone is going to say that they are. So
Okay, I think we've got them all. So we're going to move on. But again, if you guys are going through and we start moving away from this topic, but you have a question, feel free to shoot it into the chat or unmute at any time. But we're gonna move on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, okay. So now that we've talked about what we have done, we should go ahead and talk about what it is that we want to do. So our goals and interests. So this is a section where you can talk about your future plans. So that can be maybe career paths and things such as that. You can also include things that you are excited about and what aspects of those things. So for that, you definitely want to convey passion, right? Because you want to show these programs that this is something that you are applying for because you really want to do it. You're really interested, you're passionate, you will go far in it rather than just, oh, this sounds cool like that, right? And then also what experiences you want to have next. So that could be career related, that could be just anything really that you are passionate about and hope to achieve with this schooling. So let's go ahead and add on to the drafts that we have been working on so far, or we can go ahead and start editing the drafts that we already have. So if you're just starting, we can talk about things that we're excited about, what we're curious about, and what we could see ourselves doing for the next 5 years maybe. And something about that that is important to note is the length of the program. So if you are applying for a master's program, you most likely won't still be in that program in 5 years, right? However, if you are doing a PhD program or an MD program, it's definitely reasonable to say that in 5 years, you may still be doing it. So that's also something that is important to think about. And then if you do have a draft already, make sure that you made your goals clearly identifiable. So I think that sometimes it can be easy to think like, oh, it's pretty clear that I want to do research or that I want to do therapy, but you want to make sure that you specifically stated what you did want to do and that you conveyed the passion that I was talking about earlier with that. So again, we'll give you guys roughly a minute or so to do that. And as always, feel free to unmute yourself or ask any questions in the chat, and we're happy to help.
So Leah has a question. I'm applying to more than one lab at one university. How important is it that those two labs be very similar to make my personal statement strong? Good question. We actually will be getting to that, right, Amanda? Are you dealing with
Yeah.
that in a couple of slides?
How important is it to be similar? I don't know that we necessarily directly address this if we want to do it now. But you know what? Yeah, I think it would be better placed. Yeah, you know what? We're going to get to that in just a second, Leah. Yeah.
And Amy
Yeah,
has a
great
good
question.
question that's related to that too. So good question. Thank you for those. And we'll address them in just 1 second.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, should we move on to?
Yeah, sounds good. All right, yeah. So, okay, so up until this point, we had just said, well, okay, so we've had our hook, we've had our experience, we've had what we want to do. So by this point, it is very important that we are connecting the dots between all three of these things, right? Because it should definitely make sense how we got from our hook into our future goals, right? Because one of the purposes of the hook is to really show what got you interested, what made you passionate about potentially being in this field in the future. So for example, if we were to look back at the introduction example earlier about the student who had the social worker who really impacted that student's life, it would definitely make sense if in their future goals, they said that maybe they wanted to go into social work, right? That's something that makes sense. So you definitely want to make sure that there is a logical flow to the statement where we can clearly see how, oh, this impacted this person this way. Here's what they've done in that so far. And now here's what they want to do because of it. So just basically, you want to make sure that your story is cohesive and put together and flows nice and chronologically like that.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the part, I think, Amy and Leah, that you guys are referencing. So let me know if at the end of this part I didn't answer your question adequately, and then we'll do that for sure. But I think we're going to cover it. So the next section of your personal statement is going to change based on the program that you're going to be applying to. So like we were talking about before, this statement is really going to be able to be used in multiple for multiple applications, but now we want to get a little bit specific. So you're going to have, several different iterations of your personal statement, and you're going to want to have a section in it that's really tailored to what you want to do or to each program. So this is going to get into, well, why this university, why this program? So you're going to need to do a little bit of research to say specifically why you're interested. Why this lab or mentor? So this is getting, I believe, at Amy's question. And she had asked, should we list, how many potential advisors should we list? Well, it just depends, right? And I actually personally struggled with this part of it, is that a lot of the advice going out there is saying, yeah, I list at least 2. Well, it depends on what you want to do, right? If you're going to go to this specific school and you want to work with this person specifically, it's okay to list the one that you want to. Or if you like the program and you would be okay working with multiple mentors in that program, it's okay to say that. And it's great to include a number of them, sure, so that you can say, I'm interested in working with this person because their work aligns with me this way. So it's absolutely acceptable to list more than one person. You don't want to be too wordy about it, right? So get right to the point of this is my interest and this is why I like their lab and their program. And then, yeah, you're going to show the goodness of fit. So how does this program or this mentor fit me? And then what can I contribute to them? So it's a mutual relationship. So we're going to go ahead and kind of look at this next slide. It looks a little wordy. We are not going to read all of the words on the right part of the screen, but this is kind of to give you an idea. So if you're researching a program and you're saying, okay, so I want to research and see if I want to go to the psychology program, University of Michigan, go to their website, read what the program is about. So we kind of pulled out and highlighted a couple of the things that they said that their program was about. So research and diversity and collaboration. So they're all listed on the right side there. And those things are things that we pulled out of this big paragraph. And so this is important to us. And so they said that, and that'll be something that you find on the specific mentors website too, right? They'll say, this is my research interest. And if you align with that, that's wonderful. This is a program to apply to. And now in your personal statement, make sure that since you did all that research, go ahead and make sure that you indicate that you've done that research by highlighting those things in the personal statement when you get to that specific paragraph. Does that answer your question, Leah and Amy? I hope so. But you're gonna not use the same personal statement for every program. You can use that big, part that we talked about with Tanner and Dr. Hanson up until this point, and then we're gonna really make it specific at this point. Awesome, great, thank you. And then we're gonna move on to the last part with Tanner.
Yeah, so now that we've included all of the key components, we want to be sure that we are wrapping it up, that this writing sample feels closed, right? So again, you want to make sure that you are tying back to the introduction, just so that it does make sense that this is all one cohesive paper, right? One story almost about you. And this conclusion definitely does not need to be long or fluffy or a huge summary, nothing like that. Basically, the whole point of it is just to ensure that there is closure towards the end, where someone reading it feels like, okay, this is their statement, that's the end. I know what I need to know about this person now, right? So basically just to make sure that you aren't just going on and on and on and on like that. Yeah, so that was a lot of information for sure. So I will just go over some quick do's and don'ts to think about when drafting and revising the personal statements. So you want to distinguish yourself, but not be generic. You want to show that you're qualified, don't tell it, and don't list skills, because like we've talked about before, you have a CV, they can see all the labs, all the internships, so you just want to show what you've gained from them. And then you want to explain your goals and interests and don't be too general. Again, make sure that this is specific to you. And then like Amanda just talked about, you want to do your research and don't reuse the same statement, because again, different programs will want different things, right? So maybe one program will really value innovation and one will really value compassion for others. So those are both super great for sure, but one program may want one more than the other. So that's something that is great to highlight. And then finally, you want to make sure that you are treating this as a writing sample and don't try and be too informal or too clever, even though that may be tempting. It's really important to keep in mind that this is the only writing sample, again, that they are going to get from you. So this is what they are going to use to evaluate your writing ability, which again is very important. So it's important to maintain that professionalism and write this out the best that you can. All right, and we will have questions in just a minute, but before we get there, I just want to thank you all for coming so much. Hopefully this helped you a lot. And if you would like to come into the Student Success Center and talk to us about maybe brainstorming, about revising drafts that you have, or just talking about more tips in general, we would be very happy to see you. I will, in the chat right now, I will go ahead and paste the link to our website and the instructions on how to get there from Google. So you should all see that in just a second. So you can go to our website right there, and you can see the screenshot of our website there. And there's that maroon button that says make an appointment or see available appointments. So that is where you will click to make an appointment with us. You can also find our, oh yes, all appointments are virtual right now. Yes, and you can find our availability also on the website, but if that doesn't work for you, no worries at all. You can just shoot us an email, which I also pasted in the chat right there. It's ASU Psychology Success Center @gmail.com, and we will be more than happy to accommodate that, whether it is for an evening appointment or a weekend appointment or anything like that. And yeah, we would be very happy to help you. So we will open it up now to questions for Dr. Hanson, Amanda, and myself.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say this was super helpful. Like I didn't know what to expect. I like got an email about this seminar and I was like, wow, like I'm about to write my personal statement. And my personal statement definitely starts off like when I was little, like blah, blah, blah. I want to help people. So when I saw that, I was like, wow, okay, this is actually like really, really helpful. So I just wanted to thank you guys so much.
Well, I'm glad. I'm so glad.
Have a good night.
Thank you for
Thanks for
coming.
coming. Oh, and also, I thought of something after I put it in the chat, but just in case, again, I know some of you might not have the chat up if you're on your phones. It's kind of hard to see. To kind of expand a little bit, if you're applying to a program and you want to work with one person specifically, you can reach out to that person and say, hey, are you taking on students? And, you know, I did that. And one of the people I really want to work with said, I don't know. So if they say, I don't know, that means then maybe add in a couple of other names just to make sure, because you don't want it to sound like I'm only coming to the school for this person. And since they aren't taking people on, I guess we don't want to take you on, right? So even if you have a favorite, good to reach out. Okay, we've got some questions in the chat. What are some resources for writing a strong CV? Yeah, so we actually have posted on our website another webinar. Well, it wasn't a webinar, it was a seminar at that point when we were in person. And it kind of goes into personal statements for scholarships. So, but stick with it or maybe fast forward because it gets to getting a strong CV towards the end of that, that posting.
And we also have a video. I just posted the link on YouTube. It's less than 5 minutes, gives you an overview on how to write a strong CV.
Perfect.
And of course, we can also help in individual appointments with that, since we're not going to have time to do another seminar before the end of the semester.
Yeah. And then another question was, I have been told that mentioning I want to help people is trite and should be avoided. Do you find this the case? Yeah, I mean, everyone wants to help people, right? So if we say just, I want to help people, that doesn't, it's more that it doesn't tell them anything about you, right? So it's more about, well, how or why do you want to help people? And you can even couch that in a story, right? Like kind of the example that we talked about before, you know, this person helped me learn how to cope. And I thought, oh my gosh, how do people learn how to cope? I would like to do this, right? It's kind of, I think it was saying, I want to help people, but it was couched in a story. So it wasn't just saying, I want to help people, right?
Yeah, and Amanda mentioned earlier, you want to show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Show means demonstrate. Don't tell them I want to help people. Show them how you clearly want to help people through your story or through your examples. So the sentiment is great. You absolutely can have that sentiment in your personal statement, but try not to maybe write it directly like that.
Yeah. And we have a question about study abroad experience. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if your program is wanting you to be able to work with a diverse population of people, and you've been abroad, that is a really great strength, right? It also takes some guts to go and do something like that. So you can highlight things that you learned. You can highlight, wow moments. I'm sure there's a lot you can do with that study abroad experience. So absolutely. And again, it depends, like Dr. Hansen said, pick your most, your strongest experiences to highlight first. So maybe it doesn't get its own paragraph, but it can certainly be folded into your statement. Let's see. Oh, awesome. I just saw the CV. How important is it to reach out to possible PhD mentors before applying to their lab? I think it's really helpful. That's what I've been told by multiple sources. I will say that a lot of them are really busy. So try not to feel super discouraged if you don't get a whole lot of responses back either, right? Dr. Hansen, do you have anything to add?
I would say that if you can, great, but it is not required. You can still apply to a program even if you have not had direct communication with the faculty member or any faculty member.
Well, and think about it, what is reaching out going to do for you, really, right? It's for me, I did it because I wanted to see if this person was accepting students. But I mean, I can still apply even if, and a lot of people right now during the pandemic are like, I have no idea because I don't know, are you going to be allowed in my lab? I don't know, are we going to have a vaccine? I don't know anything. So, they might not be able to answer that question. So it's okay. Just, I would say that you would still want to apply even if you don't get a response or if you don't have time or desire to reach out. How do you avoid sounding too full of yourself? Oh my gosh, you know what is so funny as I'm in the honors track class for the honors thesis with psychology. And that was a question that more than one of us asked. You're not going to feel full of yourself. This is the whole point of you writing this, right? So if you're highlighting these great things that you've done, that's the expectation. So it's not saying, look at how awesome I am. I'm so much better than everyone else. It's look what I've done so that you can understand where I'm coming from and my interests. So it's so hard, right? Because we want to feel like we're having a lot of humility, but at the same time, this is the time to showcase you, right? This is the expectation. Yeah, I don't know if Dr. Hansen has any other thoughts on it from a professor perspective.
Well, I would say that, arrogance is not a desirable quality. So, I would say just have someone else read it after you've written it and get their feedback. Like, do I sound full of myself?
That's a good point.
Because you can clearly, you can definitely list your accomplishments in a way that you sound humble and thankful for the experiences and like you were a team player, or you can list your accomplishments and make it seem like you are the greatest thing that ever happened to this lab. You don't want that, right? So it can be hard, but I would say just write it and then have someone take a look at it, including us, to give you that honest feedback. Are you overemphasizing? But most of the time, students underemphasize their experiences.
Okay, and then there's a question, do you need to get a master's before you get your PhD? So that's going to be really specific to the school and program that you apply to. So for instance, ASU, one of the programs that I'm applying to, you can get your master's in passing. So I apply to the PhD program knowing that I can get my master's on the way to the PhD. And that's going to look different depending on the program and the school that you're trying to apply to. So definitely, if you have an opportunity to kind of like dig into their website, some of them are easier to find than others. And then let's see. Oh yeah, awesome. Somebody already mentioned that.
So I think you got most of the questions.
Yeah, I think we did.
Shelby brought up a good point that Career and Professional Development Services will actually edit your CV for you. So that's nice.
That is really nice. Well, and like Dr. Hansen said too, if you have materials that you're a little bit concerned with and you're like, I think it's done, but I don't know, I want to have another set of eyes on it, we can always read it in the Student Success Center for you as well. So bring it on in and we can help you edit it. Particularly because we've been thinking a lot about this recently, getting ready for this webinar. And I just recently applied to graduate school too. So I've gotten so much great advice from a lot of people that I can help dissipate down to you, and Tanner and Annie as well.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, are there any final questions?
Well, we're really glad you guys came today. I hope you got a lot out of it.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Oh, Amanda's here. Hi, Amanda.
Hi. Oh my gosh. How are you? This was awesome. This was